Hey house kids, Eric here. Today is Saturday, July 18th. We have been going over the story of Joseph the last 2 weeks, and this week we are going to wrap it up. We're going to finish it. I'm going to wrap it into a nice little bow. It ends great, so I'm excited about this. First, I want to mention next week on Sunday here at church, we're going to be doing a special event for kids. So if you're able to come, we're going to be doing Christmas in July. I mean, how cool is that? So we're going to do a special little outside event for the kids called Christmas in July. It's going to be fun. We're going to do a game, craft, do the Christmas story, because there's always room for the Christmas story, even in July. So hope you can make it. It'd be cool to see you. Let's get into the lesson. So we left off with Joseph, if you remember. He was in Egypt, and he was in prison. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and then he became second in command to help manage and take care of Egypt during these times where 7 years was going to be lots of food, and they stored it all away. So they had tons of food. And then that way, after that 7 years, there was 7 years of famine where no food grew in the land. And so the land was dry and barren. But Egypt was okay because of Joseph and because God was helping Joseph. Egypt had so much food they didn't know what to do with. But now back in Canaan, the land where Joseph's family is and where he was from, they're dealing with the famine. And there's lots of areas outside of Egypt that were dealing with this famine. And they were getting hungry because they weren't able to grow food. And so Israel, his father, said, hey, we're running out of food. I heard that Egypt has tons of it, so I'm sending you, my sons, out with some money. Take the silver, go there, and bring back some food for us so that we don't go hungry and starve. The one thing is he kept Benjamin at home. He didn't let Benjamin go, and that's because he was very overprotective of his son Benjamin. And that's also because he only had 2 children, if you remember, that was born from Rachel, the love of his life. And one of them was Joseph, who he thought was dead, even though we know that Joseph isn't dead. And then the other one was Benjamin. So he was very overprotective of Benjamin. So the other 10 sons all went to Egypt. And they got there, and Joseph recognized them. He's like, those are my brothers. But they didn't recognize him. He was probably, in Egyptian attire. He didn't look exactly the same, and they didn't recognize him, and he kept it kind of a secret. And so when they came to him, he started asking them questions, where are you from? Do you have a father at home? Do you have any other brothers at home? And they answered him all these questions, and he says, I think you're lying, and I think you're spies. And they were like, we are not spies. We are telling you the truth. And so Joseph says, if you really are telling me the truth and you're not spies, then here's what we're going to do. I'm taking one of your brothers with me, and it was Simeon, and you can buy with your silver the food you need and take it back home to, if it really is your home, your father and your other brother. And if you ever want to see Simeon again, then you need to come back here, all of you, and bring your other brother who's at home. Prove it to me, So they're like, oh, goodness. Dad's not going to be happy. And on the way home, they end up getting hungry one night probably and looking in their bags of the food. And in there was the little sacks of the silver that they gave to them. And so they must have accidentally put the silver back in there. And they panicked because they thought the Egyptians are going to think that we stole this. And so they're great. So they get back home and they tell their dad, and he's freaking out because he's like, great, I already lost Joseph. And now I might have lost Simeon. And you're telling me you want me to have Benjamin go back there? No way, they're probably going to kill him. And if Benjamin dies, I will probably die too because I will be way too sad. Time goes on. They end up eating pretty much all that food, and they still are in this famine, and they need more. So the brothers tell their dad, hey, we need to go back there and get more. And he's like, okay, go back there and get more. but you're not taking Benjamin. And Judah's like, we have to take Benjamin. You don't understand. The guy there said, if we come back without Benjamin, we're in deep, deep trouble. And so even though Israel, their dad, did not want to let him take Benjamin, he knew there was no other way. Otherwise, they're all going to just starve to death there. So they take Benjamin, they go all the way back to Egypt, and they bring with them the silver that was originally supposed to be for that first batch of food. And then they also brought more silver and then other gifts and everything. And when they got there, Joseph had a dinner prepared for him. He invited them into his house. And they came in and they were very humble. And they said, look, we didn't try to steal from you, but the silver was in our bags. We found out later on. And we brought it back and we brought you more gifts and stuff. And please, master, please. And they were very humble, because they were scared. And Joseph's like, oh, don't worry about it. Everything's all good. And they have this dinner, and the next morning, Joseph goes to send them all off, and they have their grain, but Joseph tricks them. What Joseph does is, he tells one of his servants, he's like, hey, I want you to take my silver royal cup that's for me and drinking only me, put it in the bag of grain of the youngest one named Benjamin. And so they did that. And the brothers didn't know that he did that. And so then when they went off to go home, they didn't get very far, and Joseph had a bunch of his men stop them and say, hey, why would you steal from us after everything we've done for you? And the brothers are like, whoa, we did not steal from you. We don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, let's see. And they open up all the bags, and they went oldest to youngest. And when they got to Benjamin, there was the cup in there. And Benjamin's like, I didn't take that. I don't know why it's in there. So they all end up going back into like the palace where Joseph is. And Joseph says, whoever took that is going to be my slave now. Meaning Benjamin was going to stay with him. And Judah ended up saying to Joseph, and he still doesn't know it's Joseph, he came up to him and said, look, everything we've told you is true. Our father, who he told you about, who's very old, is back at home, and he's already wept for years because his other son was lost and killed. And if he loses Benjamin, he's already told us he's going to die of sadness. You cannot take Benjamin. Here, take me instead. And so Judah is manning up here. He's like, hey, I don't want my dad to die of sadness. And this affects Joseph, because that's Joseph's dad too. And Joseph loves him. And at this point, Joseph reveals himself to them. He says, I can't lie anymore, you guys. It's me, Joseph. And they're like, what? And there's crying and hugging, and it's like this big reunion. And then Joseph's like, hey, he tells the Pharaoh, hey, these are my brothers. And the Pharaoh's like, that is awesome, because Pharaoh loves Joseph, because God helped Joseph to save, in a way, all of Egypt, right? And so he's like, the Pharaoh says to Joseph, tell your brothers to go back home, get your father and all your belongings, come back here. We'll have a nice place for you. You can live here where, there's lots of food and everything's great. And so the brothers do that. They all go back and they tell their dad, and he's like, what? I believe it that Joseph is alive. So he's excited. So they get all their stuff and they travel to go to Egypt. And when they get, or on the way to Egypt, God reveals himself to Joseph again. Not to Joseph, I'm sorry. God reveals himself to Israel, and he reminds Israel, my promise to you that you are going to be a great nation that I also gave to your grandfather Abraham is still there. It's still going to happen. And also, I want you to go to Egypt, and you are going to grow, and you're going to grow and be a successful people in Egypt. And one day, I am going to bring you out of Egypt and back into the land of Canaan, where you're from, where you'll become a great nation. So there's another promise from God let's just put that down here. Another promise from God. He is going to want you to go to Egypt, okay, and then he's going to bring you back to the land of Canaan. We're going to want to remember that because, as we've learned, God's promises always come true, right? And we learn from this that God can do anything, this whole story of Joseph, God can do anything in line with his character. Nothing God can't do in line with his character. And the other thing we learned is that God can take bad situations like Joseph's. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, went into prison for years. That's a bad situation. But he turned it into good. And that's what God does. See, this planet we're on right now, in this world we live in, has sin. We have sin. Everything has sin. And if God wasn't getting involved and turning bad situations to good, this place would have been burned down to the ground by now. But thankfully, we have a God who's constantly getting involved, and he's taking bad situations and making it good. And you know what? Sometimes these bad situations are bad for a long time. Sometimes we want the bad situation gone right away, and it doesn't end up that way. But we need to remember that God is still always there with us, just like he was with Joseph, and God can turn bad situations into good situations. That's what he does. He saves us, just like with Jesus Christ. He saved us forever, right? So always remember that when you're in a bad situation, God is still there, and he loves you, all right? So it's a great story with Joseph about God saving, right? Just like he did with Jesus. I love this story. I have a couple printouts for you guys. This one's the activity sheet. Now this one is actually a little difficult. You might want to get your parents to help you on this. It's called From Harm to Good, you see, and you're going to transform the word harm, which is right here, H-A-R-M, into the word good. And you go down this way, and you continue this way. And I'll show you the first one. You see this picture. It says a place usually away from the city where food is grown or animals are raised. And it's just changing one letter at a time. So it goes from harm to farm. And then you'll do the next one, and eventually it'll change the letters enough to where it says good. So it's kind of fun, but it's very challenging. And I got your coloring sheet for you. You could print out as well. It says God sent Joseph to Egypt to establish a remnant. And a remnant is a remaining group of people. See, there was a remaining group of God's people in Egypt, and that was a remnant. So that's a cool little printout for you. All of this you can find down below in the description, and Robin's video is down there as well. And this is the craft for this week. It is a sack of grain. Right? This is like one of those sacks of grain that they would go and purchase from Joseph in Egypt. And you see she used rice right here, and she glued it on there. And the only thing you'll need to print out for that is this template, which is also going to be down below in that description. So that's the story of Joseph. The next lesson is going to be Moses, because we're done with Joseph now. So we're going to get into Moses next time. But remember, next week on Sunday, we're doing Christmas in July. I hope you guys can be there, because what's better than Santa Claus and sunglasses? You know what I mean? Woohoo! So, love you guys. Hope you're doing well. Hopefully I can see you next week for Christmas in July. You guys take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Adios.